In 2122, the mining ship Nostromo received a mysterious signal while passing by the planet LV-426. Out of curiosity, the crew changed course to explore the planet, only to find no intelligent life but a monster born for killing, the alien. Within 24 hours, 6 of the 7 crew members were killed, with only the protagonist, Ripley, escaping aboard a small spacecraft. She entered a cryosleep chamber, hoping to be discovered by humans when she reached the solar system. But her nightmare was just beginning. The year came to 2179, 57 years after the Nostromo incident. Humans found a small spacecraft passing through the core systems and opened the hatch to find the survivor Ripley, still preserving her appearance from years ago due to the long cryosleep. A few days later, Ripley gradually recovered, but the events of 57 years ago still seemed like yesterday. Every time she slept, the terrifying image of the alien appeared before her eyes. One day, a researcher named Burke approached her. Ripley had previously entrusted him to find her daughter's whereabouts after so many years. However, Burke brought bad news. Ripley's daughter had died 2 years ago at the age of 66. Ripley, looking at her daughter's photo, felt a mix of emotions. She had once promised to return home for her daughter's birthday, but now it seemed all was in vain. That afternoon, Ripley reported her ordeal to the Wayland Corporation. She discovered an alien species on LV-426 that killed all her crewmates, and she barely escaped. According to her crewmate, there were thousands of alien eggs on the planet. If these reached Earth, humanity would be completely wiped out. However, the leadership did not believe her. LV-426 had been mined for over 20 years, with 80 families living there, and there had never been any reports of alien creatures. Ripley had been in cryosleep in space for 57 years. They speculated she might be mentally disturbed or her memories confused. Ultimately, Ripley's pilot license was revoked, and she was required to undergo 6 months of psychiatric observation in an asylum. The scene shifts to planet LV-426. Following company orders, a family of 4, including a little girl named Newt, went to explore an unknown area. During their search, they found a huge crescent-shaped spaceship nearby, a significant discovery. Newt's parents went to the ship alone, but shortly afterward, Newt's mother escaped, dragging her husband along. She repeatedly called headquarters using the vehicle's radio because a facehugger had latched onto her husband's face. 2 weeks later, Burke, accompanied by a Marine lieutenant, visited Ripley. They had just lost contact with LV-426. Although the exact reason for the loss was unclear, it might have been an alien attack as Ripley had described. Therefore, Burke invited Ripley to serve as a consultant on the rescue mission, as she was the only one familiar with the creature. After several months of cryosleep, Ripley, Burke, and the lieutenant led a Marine detachment to LV-426. During a meal, Ripley noticed a synthetic person named Bishop in the team. A synthetic had betrayed her team 57 years ago, which deeply ingrained her distrust for synthetics. However, in current society, it was standard for synthetics to participate in space missions, and they were equipped with behavior controllers that prevented them from harming humans. Nonetheless, Ripley remained distrustful. Before landing, Ripley briefed the soldiers about the alien. Its speed and strength were extraordinary, and a single creature had nearly wiped out her entire squad. She hoped they would take the mission seriously. These veterans, however, were not intimidated by mere alien creatures, not even alien bugs. Ripley hoped the problem on LV-426 was just a communication issue and not an actual alien threat. Soon, the team was armed and then landed on the planet's surface. Over the years, people had built many air processors on LV-426, and the planet's atmosphere was now breathable for humans. The colony appeared undamaged from the outside, with even the electricity running normally, but the entire building was eerily quiet. A 6-person special ops team entered the base fully armed, while others stayed in armored vehicles to remotely command their movements. The scene inside the base was a stark contrast to the outside. Signs of struggle were everywhere. Yet strangely, no bodies were found. The soldiers used motion detectors to search for survivors but found none. Instead, they discovered that the floor had suffered varying degrees of corrosion. Ripley immediately understood, the alien's blood was highly corrosive, and it must have attacked the colony. Whatever had happened, the interior seemed safe for now, so Ripley and her group entered. They found many doors and windows welded shut and the elevator blocked with heavy equipment, as if to prevent something from entering, but their blockade had failed. The group eventually reached the lab, where many facehugger specimens were stored in cultivation tanks, 2 of which were still alive. Bishop examined the work records on the table. These facehuggers had been forcibly cut from people's faces, and those who had been parasitized had died on the operating tables. As they discussed this, a life signal suddenly appeared on the detector, moving rapidly toward them. The group's first thought was that a monster was approaching, so they readied their weapons and entered alert mode. Soon, the creature indicated by the signal flashed before them, and they realized it was just a frightened little girl. Ripley followed her into a dilapidated workshop. No one knew what she had been through or how she had survived. Ripley just held her in her arms, trying her best to comfort her. The girl's name was Newt, and she was likely the only survivor in the base. However, no matter how people questioned her, she remained silent. Ripley could tell she was terrified. Meanwhile, technicians had discovered where people were. Everyone working here had a tracking chip implanted in their body, and as long as they were within the tracking range, their location could be found. According to the monitor, they were all concentrated on the third sublevel. Perhaps they had deliberately gone there to avoid the monsters. The group didn't delay and drove the armored vehicle to their destination. The same plan was followed. The combat team entered the third sublevel while others stayed in the armored vehicle to command the operation. The temperature on the third sublevel was very high, and the walls were covered with a biological secretion that resembled a giant nest. The soldiers quickly reached the target area, but to their surprise, there were no living people there. They were stuck to the walls like prey, and the floor was littered with empty alien eggs and shed facehugger skins. At that moment, a team member spotted another survivor nearby, but the next second, a chestburster emerged from his body. The soldiers quickly used flamethrowers to kill him, but this action woke the sleeping aliens. Before they could react, 4 soldiers were killed by the aliens' claws, and the others picked up their weapons to fight back. However, there were too many monsters, and the situation quickly spiraled out of control. Ripley knew that if she didn't do something, the combat team would be wiped out. Ignoring the danger, she drove the armored vehicle in, but ultimately, only 2 or 3 soldiers were rescued. The situation was now very clear. All the colonists had been killed. They had been parasitized by facehuggers, giving birth to hundreds of aliens. Ripley immediately contacted the transport ship to come and pick them up. But to everyone's surprise, an alien had stowed away on the transport ship, attacked the pilot, and the ship crashed before their eyes. Now completely desperate, with no transport ship meaning no return to the main ship and hundreds of aliens in the nest, it seemed there was no chance of winning this battle. After returning to the base, the soldiers took inventory of their weapons. They had several pulse rifles, 15 grenades, and 4 automated sentry guns. The sentry guns were highly efficient at auto-targeting and reloading, but even so, surviving the night seemed difficult. With only a few hours until nightfall, when the creatures would swarm out, the soldiers set up the sentry guns in 2 narrow tunnels, ideal for sniping targets. Other entrances were securely welded shut with heavy objects. This was all the effort they could muster. Afterwards, Ripley placed Newt in the medical room. Losing her daughter had been a lifelong regret for Ripley, and Newt's presence inevitably evoked her maternal instincts. Regardless of anything else, she had to ensure Newt's safety. During their time back at the base, Bishop had been studying the facehuggers. Since these creatures hatched from eggs, there must be a queen-like creature reproducing somewhere on the planet. Ripley didn't care about these details. She instructed Bishop to destroy all samples after his research, but Bishop refused because Burke had ordered him to bring back 2 facehugger specimens. As a synthetic, he only obeyed orders. Ripley, furious, confronted Burke. She had already seen the mission log. It was Burke who had ordered Newt's family to investigate the unknown area. The tragedy of the 80 families in the base was all Burke's conspiracy, just to find the alien creatures and bring them back for research. As they talked, the base's alarm suddenly went off. The aliens had breached the tunnels, although they couldn't see how many there were. The 500 rounds in the sentry guns were quickly depleted, indicating a massive number. Then, another piece of bad news came from Bishop. The recent crash of the transport ship had damaged the base's reactor. In 4 hours, the reactor would explode with the force of 4 billion tons of TNT. At that point, they wouldn't need the aliens to finish them off. They would be reduced to cosmic dust. At that moment, one of the soldiers thought of a plan. There was an air control tower nearby. They could use it to remotely arrange for a transport ship from the main ship, but someone had to go there to operate it manually. Bishop volunteered. As a synthetic, he would not likely trigger the aliens' alert. It would take about 3 hours from connecting the signal to the transport ship landing. They had to find a way to survive that long. But just as Bishop left, another tunnel's sentry gun was activated. Watching the ammunition quickly deplete, everyone started to panic. Just when they were at their most tense, the monsters suddenly stopped their attack. It seemed they had given up on the concentrated fire and were looking for other passages. Ripley had not rested for over 24 hours. Taking advantage of this break, she went to the medical room and fell asleep holding Newt. Before long, Ripley was awakened by a noise. She saw 2 empty cultivation tanks shaking on the floor. Her first reaction was that the facehuggers had escaped from them, so she woke Newt, intending to flee the room, but as they got up, a facehugger pounced at them. Fortunately, Ripley reacted quickly and pressed it under the bed, but this was only a temporary solution. Moreover, the location of the other facehugger was still unknown. Worse still, the door was locked. Ripley clearly had brought weapons into the room, but now the weapons were taken outside the door. Clearly, someone was deliberately setting them up. The two screamed at the camera, hoping someone would notice their plight. Burke indeed saw this scene, but he turned off the monitor instead of reporting it. It was obvious this was all Burke's doing. Waiting any longer would only lead to death. So Ripley, thinking quickly, took out a lighter and triggered the room's fire alarm system. This action indeed caught the attention of the team. When they arrived at the medical room, the two facehuggers were about to succeed. Without a second thought, they broke the glass and killed both facehuggers. Ripley had already guessed who was behind this: Burke. He wanted an alien to parasitize inside her and then bring her back to Earth in a state of cryosleep, thus safely transporting the alien back. As they talked, the base's power was suddenly cut off. The intelligence of these creatures far exceeded their understanding. They hurriedly took out detectors to track the aliens' movements, but to their surprise, although the base entrance was locked, the detector showed that the aliens had already entered the room. Their first thought was that there must be an entrance they had overlooked, and the aliens had found it. At that moment, noise suddenly came from the ventilation ducts. The soldiers looked up cautiously and saw that the aliens had reached their heads. The group had snuck in through the ventilation ducts. Everyone immediately picked up their weapons to fight back, but the number of opponents was overwhelming. They could only retreat while fighting. During this, Burke was killed by an alien, and more of the special ops team died. Continuing this way, annihilation was only a matter of time. The commander urgently contacted Bishop to ask how much longer he needed. Bishop reported that the transport ship would land in 16 minutes. They had to hurry over immediately. By then, only the commander, Ripley, and Newt were left in the team. They just needed to pass through a vent ahead to reach their destination. However, Newt, being small, fell into the sewer, and the commander immediately took out tools to cut the floor. But he was a step too late. Newt had been abducted by an alien, and the commander was seriously injured during the struggle. There was no choice. Newt could only send the commander to the transport ship first. With 26 minutes left until the reactor exploded, Ripley told Bishop to wait for her return before leaving, then took her weapons and went back inside the base. Because Newt had a tracker on her, Ripley quickly found her location. At that moment, a facehugger was about to parasitize Newt, but Ripley, quick on the draw, shot the facehugger dead. Then, she picked up Newt and ran to the exit. By mistake, Ripley entered a huge nest, and as she had guessed, an alien queen, several times larger than the other creatures, was laying eggs there. When the queen realized someone had intruded, her two personal guards began to approach Ripley. Knowing their weakness, Ripley aimed her flamethrower at the alien eggs, seemingly warning the queen not to make any sudden moves. Sure enough, the alien queen immediately signaled her guards to back off. Ripley carefully walked to the exit, and once she was sure she was in a safe range, she turned on the firepower and destroyed the entire nest. But the alien queen was not so easily killed. It forcibly separated from the ovary and escaped from the nest. With less than 4 minutes left until the explosion, Ripley successfully escaped to the rendezvous point with Newt, but Bishop did not show up on time. Ripley shouted angrily, frustrated that she had been deceived by a synthetic yet again. Moreover, an elevator nearby suddenly started moving up, indicating that the alien queen had followed them. Just when all seemed lost, Bishop, piloting the transport ship, suddenly appeared beside them. They didn't dare delay, jumped onto the transport ship, and escaped. Subsequently, the reactor exploded, and the base instantly disappeared from the planet. Back on the main ship, everyone breathed a sigh of relief. Just when Ripley was expressing her gratitude to Bishop, the alien queen suddenly appeared and tore Bishop in half. It turned out that in the last moment before the transport ship left the planet, the alien queen had also jumped aboard. With the commander seriously injured, Bishop torn in half, and Newt powerless, the task of confronting the alien queen fell entirely on Ripley, but she did not back down. Instead, she drove a mechanical loader to face the alien queen head-on. Ripley had a level 2 driving license, and the loader was as agile as a part of her body. However, despite this, she was still no match for the queen in terms of strength. Out of options, Ripley resorted to the old method. She opened the hatch, using the massive suction created by depressurization to suck the alien queen into space. This method proved effective. Ripley pressed the loader onto the alien queen, then opened the hatch. The weight of the queen, combined with the pressure from the loader, instantly sucked it into space. Ripley then used the ladder to escape. In the final scene of the movie, the 3 survivors entered cryosleep. Although the operation had heavy losses, at least they had saved a child, which could be considered worthwhile.